filmmakers, yeah? Or media, within media ambitions, yeah? Aspiring filmmakers, cool. That's amazing. I wish I had started doing this when I was your age. I grew up in Marin, actually. I went away to go to university in Santa Barbara, and then after that moved to Kenya in 2008, and I started making movies over there. And I hadn't really made any movies yet, but it was a new environment, and there were a lot of stories waiting to be told there. And this is my third movie from East Africa. One of the things I'd love to hear from you guys today, in fact, is you know, this film documentary, The Medium, it's a little bit long, right? It's, you know, it's an hour, 10 minutes, and nowadays we're really taking in so much content in much shorter form. And you know, we can make a trailer version of this, but starting to approach like social issues or really important stories, thinking about 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, it's a whole other challenge. It's a whole other endeavor to convey something and hit people in the heart in 2-3 minutes. It's really tough. Are you guys challenged to make something like that? Is that a project you're working on nowadays?
Yeah, short film.
Short film. What are the topics?
Mostly for advertisement.
Advertisements.
Political advertisement.
So you're being asked to pick a side. Okay. This, I totally picked a side here too. You know, people who buy ivory are bad guys. It's to really like oversimplify it, and we restrained ourselves in making this movie to really just come out and say that. You know, yeah.
You having said that, I found it interesting the inclusion of the interview with the Kenyan guy who was talking about the reason that he goes on poaching missions. I thought that was an interesting inclusion in a documentary that was so clearly slanted, like biased towards the side of like that ivory poaching is bad.
Yeah, I don't look at that guy as the problem, actually. Thanks. I look at him as, you know, his back is against the wall, and I would do probably what he's doing if I were in his shoes. You know, he's got, he doesn't have a lot of options right now where he lives. You know, his ancestors used to live in that park. And you could probably tell by looking around that it's a dry place, probably a tough place to survive. And, you know, people in that ecosystem have really co-evolved. And so the imposition of putting the parks there disrupted a balance. You know, they put people along these margins, and then, you know, it kind of urbanized around the edges of the parks. And then in an urban area, you need commerce, and, you know, you need money, and you need to produce something, and you need people to sell it to. And that isn't happening around the parks. It's full-on systemic poverty, and they're, you know, 80% or something unemployment there. And so Stephen, like, I used to be a tour guide. So, you know, had you gone on safari 10 years ago or something with your family and gone to a park where he was working, he might have been the guy who was riding around in the vehicle with you, pointing at the animals. So that goes to show, you know, the tourism industry has lost some talent, and it's being applied elsewhere. You know, like this guy, he knows the wildlife really well, both because he grew up there, but also because of his professional life, and he doesn't have that job anymore. And, you know, an elephant walking by has got money sticking off of its face, you know, and to him, culturally, there's no major obstacle to kill that elephant. Economically, there's a huge incentive. So I get it. I totally get why that guy does what he does, but he's not the problem. It's the fact that he's got people to sell that ivory to, which I regard as the problem. Even, you know, there's another film out right now called White Gold about ivory, and the angle that they're taking is that the killing of elephants and the harvesting of ivory is feeding terrorist organizations. And that's not the end of the problem either. You know, terrorist organizations don't just like to pile up ivory somewhere. They like to have money, and they still need a market too. So even if it's Al-Shabaab, Al-Qaeda, you know, LRA, whoever it is that's killing elephants, they still need an Asian market and an American market to turn that into cash. So Stephen is not the issue. You know, if I only had 2 places to apply pressure to this issue, it wouldn't be on the poacher. I would definitely try my best to secure the parks and to dissuade people from coming in there, more just to protect elephants. Put some type of near military-like protection on the existing elephants, and with the other arm, do your best to kill demand in Asia, and that's also another huge challenge. It's a culturally important thing there. It's a status symbol, you know. But you know, like blood diamonds, we've all kind of come to realize that ivory is also very bloody. Yeah.
Yeah, this is just on the topic of Asia's demand for the ivory. Why exactly did they choose to implement that 1 year like permitted selling of ivory? Why did the government decide to implement that?
That's a great question. I think the case to do that was, the argument is actually back on the table again, because countries like Tanzania, Botswana, Zimbabwe have warehouses full of what could be hundreds of millions of dollars of ivory, and these are impoverished countries, and they claim that, well, this is a slightly different example, but the African countries who possess ivory stockpiles claim that they'll put that money towards conservation, and the Asian sell-offs were actually, it was an economic idea, saying that if we flood the market with ivory, it will devalue. If we make it suddenly abundant, it should decrease the price, decrease the incentive to go get more. But what it did is it just it further stimulated the appetite for ivory. It's not really sound economic planning at all, and I think a lot of people just got very rich. I think it was a very greedy thing to do. And if anybody brings the idea back to the table again today, I just think they need to consider a world where ivory is as intrinsically valueless to humans as driftwood on the beach. You know, it's only valuable to elephants. It's only valuable to them to scrape trees, to dig holes, to fight one another, to establish social hierarchy. Like ivory is only important to elephants intrinsically, and people need to be aware of that. Yeah. So, do you guys have any questions about like the process or setting out to make movies and gear? And, yeah.
How big was the crew on this movie? Was it like there were a lot of
Yeah, at our biggest day we were 2.
Wow. That's impressive.
Yeah. Yes.
Over what period of time was this film?
Over what period of time did we produce it? So the original job, Kristen, the executive producer, wanted to produce a short film, kind of like the short piece that I was asking you guys about. She wanted like 2 to 3 minutes, something to go broadly across the internet to draw attention to what the work that the Sheldrick Trust is doing. We did that in 10 days. We shot the material for a 3-minute piece in 10 crazy days. I mean, like our very first day, and like any given day in the life of the Sheldrick Trust, this is why they're like a dream subject. Any given day, all of the stuff you saw in the movie can happen. Like several rescues, little miracles at the nursery where somebody asserts, little elephant asserts his or her independence and walks off and goes back to the wild. Like all of those things can happen in any given day. So 10 days was enough to get a ton of footage to comprise what was like a 3 or 4 minute piece. But there were some emergent characters in that footage that called for us to go back and shoot more. And altogether, I think we had like 30 shooting days, and then 6 months of iterative kind of cutting and shaping the story. But it could totally be faster or slower than that. My first movie took 4 years, and I think I was I was following human stories and a human arc. And so it's not like, jump into the action and shoot, come out, and then make a movie out of that. It was more like, actual human development. It takes longer. Yeah. So all within a year. We started like a year ago last week, actually. Yeah.
Did you ever put cameras on RC helicopters?
Yeah. Did you notice there were a couple of floating shots in there? Yeah. We brought a couple of those Phantoms over there. The DJI Phantom 2 was the one we used. Incredibly easy. You can figure out that device in an afternoon. Just do it on the grass. You'll crash it in the beginning. And don't fly it too far away from yourself. I think the first time I launched one of those things, I was like, how far can this thing go? And then I didn't realize that I flew it out of sight, and I couldn't see it anymore. And this thing was probably 500 feet in the sky, and in somewhere in that general area, there's like $1,000 in the sky somewhere over there. I was like, I turned the little thing off and I walked over till I could hear it again, and oh, good, there it is. Thank God, it was just hovering there waiting for me. So yeah, they're actually really cool. They can do things, you know, you can imagine a dolly kind of in the sky, and there's a shot in here where it's kind of cruising back. It's this big reveal, and the elephants are walking towards it, and then you see the people. That's, you know, people try to do that with cranes and with tracks, and to get a smooth glide like that and to present and reveal a scene. The drone is a really cost-effective way to do that. But the one piece of advice I'll give you with those, other than don't let it get out of sight, is pretend that it's on rails and do very simple moves with it, because really dramatic stuff looks terrible. I've tried it and it's like dizzying and disorienting, but just imagine, you know, it's barely moving and then it looks really powerful. Yes?
Like, what kind of microphones did you use?
A bunch of them. All the run and gun stuff, we had this little Panasonic shotgun mic on top. I shot this on a Panasonic GH3. If you've ever seen these cameras, it's like the Canon, you know, 5D, 70, 60, but like 2/3 the size. It's really crisp. They're sharper. Those Panasonics are sharper than the Canons somehow. Not quite as good light sensitivity, but I used an onboard mic on top of the GH3, and then I used a zoom quite a lot, with kind of a dead cat thing on it, and would do ambient recordings with that, and then all of the interviews were Sennheiser lavaliers. Yeah. Yes.
How did you get the poachers to talk on camera?
Yeah, a combination of things. That guy gets arrested all the time. He's a known poacher, and the rangers in that area, many of them come from that town where he comes from, and it's so commonplace for him. You know, I think you might even see this with people crossing the border here. They cross, they hang out for a while, and they're arrested and sent back, and they get to know the border community, and they get to know them, vice versa. And I think that's really similar to what's happening around the edges of the parks. There's a broken system, and the need is there, and so it's like osmosis, you know, it's just continually kind of trying to equilibrate. But so the guy he had been caught, and he realized that if I interview him and he admits to what he does, he's not going to go to prison for a long time. He knows the system really well, and I think he actually has some remorse about what he does, and you can kind of feel that. I left that interview like big hug to that guy, and like every time I go by there, I'm going to stop and visit him, and it really opened me up quite a lot. His openness, but I speak decent Swahili, and I think that is a little bit disarming when you show somebody that you're really interested in them, and you're really going to make the effort to kind of step into their shoes for a minute. Little things, like if you can even just greet somebody in their local language or know something about the food that their wife is preparing over there, you know what I mean? It's like little gestures of respect and interest go a long ways around the camera, you know? Like, so you're not coming to take something from him, but instead to show understanding and to let the guy be heard. Yes?
I'm wondering in that scene where you were following footsteps and were you afraid ever?
I was with guys with guns, you know. They were all, and they do this every day, and not really. I mean, there's one scene, you know, the scene where the pilot is instructing us on the ground to like follow after some people, and we found a dead elephant. That day, we were actually tracking a different elephant, and there were some poachers in the area that had darted it, or arrowed it rather, and they were waiting for it to drop, and it was like this race basically to find the elephant. We were with vets and we were trying to treat it, and the elephant charged us. Like, we tracked that thing for 3 days, and the first 2 days it was just not having it. It really didn't want people around it anymore, even us, the vets, with a dart gun. And there was a moment where that elephant charged a group of like 20 of us, and we were Olympic sprinters, like in every direction. And that was the closest, I think, that we came to real danger. But one of these Shelter Trust Rangers got shot last year, the week before we started filming this, they had a brush with some poachers that were having automatic weapons, and one of them was killed. Yeah.
What precautions did you and I guess your team of one other person take to ensure that if you encountered a poacher that they wouldn't just attack you or see you as some sort of threat with the cameras and all the equipment?
Just trust in the rangers. One of the rangers we were with was a sharpshooter trained by American Special Forces, actually, and he was a real badass. It felt pretty good being with that guy. And the other people, you know, the poachers are not. There's a type of poacher that arrive. These really like corporate guys, these highly funded guys, show up in trucks, helicopters, even bikes. They have automatic weapons, and they'll kill a whole family of elephants and get a lot of ivory at once. We would have been in big trouble if we had run into a group like that. But they have no interest in running into us, and so those people work incredibly efficiently. They get into the park, out, and if we had run into them, it would have been a bad situation. But the guys that you more commonly run into are like Steven. They're just dudes hiding, carrying wires or bow and arrow, and they don't want to see us either. I didn't take any personal precautions, just kind of trusting that the rangers would keep us safe.
So you grew up in Marin, you went to Branson. How'd you end up in Nairobi?
I studied medicine actually. I did a doctorate in like biochemistry at UC Santa Barbara, and I graduated from that like a week before Obama was elected, and then went to Nairobi to go work in a hospital in an HIV clinic, and I did that for about 3 months, and it felt very touristic almost, and I was, you know, a scientist looking at a social problem, not really a medical problem, HIV. You know, it's a product of poverty and a lack of awareness, and so I didn't really feel like me being in the lab any longer was useful, and so I just kind of stopped this whole scientific thing and applied that research and publication methodology through film to these social problems that were really like hitting me in the chest, you know. Made a film for 4 years about street kids and the bond between them. Kids from a nomadic tribe, a pastoralist community in northern Kenya, who called the Turkana, who, you know, these kids traditionally should just be like grazing goats, but nowadays they decide not to live in the village anymore and come live in the street, and what really binds them together is an addiction to glue and to like hustling and to crime, and they turn into this little, you know, like age 5 to age 20, like a little tribe of children. And I made a film about 4 of them, and I just got stuck, you know. I made a lot of friends and almost, you know, family to me through that process, and then this project kind of fell into my lap with my creative partner, and we just made another movie. And this one was much easier to do. You know, and spending time with the Sheldrick Trust is a joy, and it's life-changing, and being around elephants is something that I hope everybody gets to do sometime in their life. It's very profound. Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah, go ahead.
Did any of the elephants like bond to you guys during the filming?
Yeah. You know the one that's kind of clownish? He like picked up a stick and was like,
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That elephant, his name is Kitheka. He's truly a clown, and like they each have these different personalities, and some are shy, and some are very like, some are bullies, and some are performers, and he's totally a performer, and he would recognize us when we would come, and you know, you just stop whatever he's doing and come over, and knowing that he's going to get this response. They deliberately rotate the keepers, the guys with the green coats, as not to allow too deep a bond to form between any particular keeper and any elephant, because the elephants need to kind of graduate from that nursery to this place out in the park where they go as adolescents, and then they walk off into the wild eventually. And if they were missing too much that one person, it wouldn't happen. It would like arrest the process, you know. So they are very aware of the elephant's tendency to want to bond. You know, they've had their family taken away, and that hard wiring is, you know, it's looking for something to attach to. And in the beginning, actually, when Daphne started doing this 40, 50 years ago, she's I forget the name of her book. She's a fantastic book, Daphne Sheldrick. It's about her life there. She raised 2 elephants that became totally dependent on her, and she went away for one of her daughter's weddings, and during the time the animal died of grief. It just died. Like it's shut down, and it had been alive and healthy for years. And in the nursery, like 2 or 3 years, she knew this one. And, you know, it was like losing its mother again. Yeah. So yeah.
I wondered about distribution. So I want all my friends to see this. Where will they be?
This film was just finished like a week ago, and then we rushed it to the festival, and then premiered it, and we're hoping that it will play another festival or two, just to create events to do exactly what we're doing right now. This is like really the rewarding part. But then hopefully it will go on TV, and I think that's the really tricky part of this process. Documentaries are much easier to place on TV when halfway through the process you've struck a deal with a studio. And I learned this in my first movie, that if you've got this film that you made according to your own terms and you love it and it's great and it's down to the last frame, it's done, if you go shopping with that thing, people kind of wish you had approached them a year earlier in terms of getting it on television. I heard that from all of the major broadcasters in Europe, from Arte to ZDF to BBC, all of the big ones in Europe love to co-produce and get involved early. But this one has this advantage in that I think it's a bit of a timely issue. There's a lot of really beautiful time with baby elephants. It's not asking a lot, I think, of audiences to just kind of enjoy that for a minute. And then Kristen's involvement will really help us with distribution. When you find somebody, especially in the US, pretty much only in the US, she adds a lot in terms of appeal. But I don't know how your friends are going to get to see it immediately. We're in this like a little bit of a limbo, but it'll get resolved as quickly as possible. TV, I hope. Yeah.
For any of your movies, have you ever put them online for free?
Not yet. Well, one of them, yeah. I did one, it's a short, it's about musicians and community radio stations messaging to kids in Joseph Kony's Lord's Resistance Army to come out of the bush. There's this amazing phenomenon of community radio stations in the middle of nowhere calling to kids by name saying the war's over, come home. Did a short film about that for the UN, and that one is available. But we've never just made a film and put it out for free. There was a guy on the festival circuit last year who did a film called Pirate Bay. Did you see this? I still haven't seen it, but millions of people saw it for free because, of course, it's the spirit of the film. He made it and just put it out there, and everyone thought by doing that he would never get a TV deal because the TV wants exclusivity. And I mean, everyone was completely wrong because he just demonstrated that there's this hungry market out there. Millions of people wanted to see this movie, and that Pirate Bay community doesn't overlap at all with the television viewing community. Like there's very little overlap. The television community is our parents, still. And the Pirate Bay community is definitely not my parents. They barely know how to browse. So it's like, that's the strategy. It's a guerrilla distribution strategy that people are doing nowadays. So don't be afraid of that. Although festivals will refuse you if your film is out, unless it's some total phenomenon. Any favorite documentaries among you guys? What are some of the ones that got on your radar recently? Yeah.
Blackfish.
Uh-huh.
Family and Friends.
Yeah, it was a real indictment, that movie. There was no missing the point. Yeah.
There's one, I haven't seen it in a couple of years. It's like Jiro Dreams of Sushi, or
Uh-huh,
Jiro Dreams of Sushi. I just thought it was such a simple, minimalist topic, but they made it so interesting.
Yep.
So I really liked that a lot.
But yeah, all of these are examples of not needing to go to far-flung places and shoot anything exotic. Like that's almost not as interesting to us. It's probably not as interesting to us as the stuff we know very well. So if I wanted to, if we all had, before we leave this room, to come up with a way to deliver this message to kids in China that are your age, young people your age, what would you make? How would you release it? What would you do? This is a huge question that no one has an answer to, by the way. So if we started fresh right now as a committee of like filmmakers, you know, and we want to hit this message, you know, of leaving ivory, and we want to show it to an Asian market. What do we know? You know, what do you know about yourselves, or whatever it is that you're ingesting these days, and the stuff that's impacting you? Maybe use that as a lead into conceiving a piece that would be effective in advocacy in China. Yeah.
I think if you were to do that, you would really to emphasize the consciousness of the elephants themselves, and really displaying them as thinking organisms rather than as just giant game, because it's like huge ungulates. It's so easy to just think of them as more cattle.
Totally.
So I think that's how we would do that.
Let people connect to them, just feel the sentience, and really,
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of the images, even though they were pretty brutal, of like the elephants and the cut off tusks, like without being processed at all, were really effective. Because yeah, it's similar to what Amin is saying, but like when you look at this little carved piece of whatever, it's really easy to not think of it as like, you know, the same thing as like a wood carving or something. It's just it's a processed piece of
Material.
Yeah, of material
Yeah.
that's like, there's no real connection to where it comes from.
right.
But if you show the whole process of like, here are the elephants, and then like the dead elephant bodies, and then with the horns, and then the carved pieces, I think it all really connects together.
Why did you guys choose not to focus so much on the fact that it's like it's a keystone species that sort of like lays the foundation for, you know, the grasslands and so much biodiversity? Because I was really only focused on for like 30 seconds. Did you just feel like everything else was way more powerful and would really grab people a lot more?
It's a really good question. It's a classic choice that you have to make. I think people care less about what you're talking about. Like, it's like, this is really sad to say, and I'm with you on this. I really, that type of information is what wins me over, you know? Like, we can see systems, but your general audience really wants, like, I think, is more moved by when an elephant looks them right in the eye and shows, like, you know, they see shots of these elephants on their side. You think they're dreaming about their slain mother, and you can see what they're dreaming about, and you can see the grief of them the mourning of them being separated from their families, and the universality of that. Like, you can feel that empathetic current is alive when you see them suffering, having been ripped away from their families. That is what really enrages people. The placing them in talking about them as the integral member of this ecosystem, which they are. They're more than integral. They're gardeners. They really do a lot of this. They provide for others. I mean, look at global warming. You know, like, can't we see the cause-effect nature of what's happening here? Yet we're still debating that. You know, we're still questioning science. So that's like, apparently a slippery slope. Oh wait, what do you mean? You know, I don't have any elephants in my area. Then why does this affect me at all? You know, it gives maybe somebody an excuse to kind of make it someone else's problem, instead of asking them to feel like what it would be like if your parents were killed. Yeah.
How did you become so passionate about elephants?
By meeting one. Yeah, totally. By getting asked to go there. I love wildlife and nature, and I love being a part of it. Always have. Growing up in Marin, you don't really have a choice. This is a spectacular place to become passionate about nature. But I hadn't. When you meet an elephant, you ever looked a horse in the eye? You know, they have these really deep, sensitive eyes. It's like that, but it's even more. And also that they're a really good symbol for the bigger issue about coexistence and where we're all headed in our footprint on this planet. Like whales, you know, it could have just as easily been a whale. Yeah.
What are you doing next? And how do you get into another project after this?
Yeah. Okay. My next is a little bit exceptional. It's a little bit aside from what you just asked. So I'll answer the second part first. To get into a project, you don't really need a lot of money. If you've got a camera and a bit of skill, you can go find a story and prove that you have the nose for a story and then can get access. I was at Hot Docs is a big documentary film festival in Toronto. I was there last year, and I went to the pitch forum where people with projects in the incubator were looking for funding. And the one thing that they were being asked many things, but the one thing that the broadcasters wanted to hear, and the potential financiers, they wanted to know, what is it about you that gives you access to this story? And so if you've got a nose for a story, and you're the one person on earth that can tell it, then that's fundable. And then you can go do it for a little shoestring, go get a proof of your concept, and then educate yourself on the financing landscape. There are grants, there are networks to co-produce, there are angel investors, there are foundations that give you money that you don't have to pay back, which is brilliant, especially for documentary. So that's the way to do it. Just go out, shoot a little bit, and then cut a trailer. And let people taste and feel what you can do and the story that you have access to. And anyone in this room can do that. That's the way to get going. But me, I'm working for I'm working for an organization based in East Africa from London. We train people to be citizen journalists in situations of human rights violations. Like if our community were oppressed by a tyrannical regime, and during the election we were all being intimidated and bullied to vote one way, we go into that community and quietly teach people how to record what's happening and support them with cameras, most of the time hidden cameras, and then we get the footage out and either get it on the news or bring it to like the ICC or somewhere where justice can be assisted by visual evidence. And so that's, I have networks of people now that I work with in East Africa and Central Africa and Asia, and I'm supporting them like a director, but I don't touch the camera. And I don't know where any of the footage that they're getting is headed. It might go on the news, it might go into a documentary, it might go into a court case, but yeah, that's where I'm going now. I really like this idea of first-person witness. Yeah, it's really raw. When somebody who's not a shooter, somebody who's like affected by, difficult circumstances, when they film it, it's really high voltage footage, and it can really do a lot, high impact stuff. Yeah.
Did you do the editing for your film in Kenya, or did you do that back here?
I did it in Kenya. Yeah,
So
with
is
like
it-
a laptop with the headphones.
Yeah, you did it all.
Yeah, I did it on a MacBook Pro behind you.
What kind of software did you use?
I used Final Cut 7. I'm still kind of stuck on that one. I've used the other softwares before. I got into Premiere for a while for some projects, and I've used 10 to do a music video, but I don't know why I got into 7 on this one. I really like that program. I wish it were more robust. It's very buggy. You guys probably know that if you use it. And as you start getting different types of footage and try and put it into that system, it really becomes unstable. But I think it's just a habit. There's a million filmmakers that say the same thing. It's just their hands know one software. What do you guys use? 10.
10.
One thing you could think about, later in your careers is, there are experts who do sound design, and it's a joy to give your movie to somebody who's a director and an expert in sound design or an animator. Like, it's really amazing to hand over your work to somebody else and have them do their thing. They're total experts at it. Yeah, is anyone here animating? Messing around with After Effects or anything like that? Not yet. If you want a job, learn that program.
Thanks, Austin.
Thank you guys.